Hi, Charlie. I'm Sarah from the upcoming. Real pleasure to be with you here at London Film Festival. For people who haven't seen Wild Style before, can you give us a brief intro? What can they expect from your movie?
Well, the movie was begun in 1980, and it represented a group of people in New York that I was meeting at that time. Fab Five Freddy and I began making the movie from a place called the Times Square Show, which was June of 1980. And I was very, very keen because I knew that he was working with Lee Quinones, who happened to be the most legendary subway graffiti artist in New York in the 70s. And I said to him, bring Lee Quinones to me tomorrow with the two of you, and I'll get you some money and you can do a piece out in front. And they did a big Fab Five out in front on this building. And that was the beginning of making Wild Style. The idea was to create some kind of narrative story that followed a legendary character who, just as a complete, so much of what we did was in a sense a kind of joke. It was a way to be so obvious as to engage whoever happened to come into this film will know what the hell we're talking about. So I called him, instead of calling him Lee, I called him Zorro. Because Zorro left his mark, Zorro always left this Z. And there was a thing in the movie about Z's. There was Zephyr, Z-Rock. Z's for some reason is it from Zorro? Not really, but it's a great letter to work with. So what I wanted to do was really represent the culture in the Bronx and set the story in the Bronx. And people never thought about culture coming from the Bronx. The Bronx nothing happened up there, except Bronx is burning. In the 70s, we all knew on the news that during the blackout that it was the neighborhood that was burned the worst and had the worst poverty and was sort of a hopeless place for anybody. So why even go up there? So the idea of making a movie that's introducing a brand new culture that's coming out of teenagers was shocking to people. And the movie was made without actors. It's all real people representing themselves or what they really do. But it's not a documentary. It's a narrative movie for teenagers. I always thought it was something teenagers were really going to understand and identify with. And when the film opened in Times Square in 1983, it was the second highest grossing movie in all of New York. And it was playing in one movie theater, second to Terms of Endearment, which was playing in 30 movie theaters and being promoted by the powers that be. So we're talking about an underdog culture, aren't we? Because I was also an underdog filmmaker. I never went to film school. Film that I had made before, I had made for $2,000 is a Super 8 Kung Fu movie made in the same community as my star, Lee Quinones, which was a housing project by the Brooklyn Bridge, where he had been doing these gigantic murals around on handball courts around in that neighborhood. It was really something having to do with a kind of filmmaking that I felt comfortable with. In other words, it is not an art film in a pretentious sense, but it is a movie about art, and it's a movie about artists. And I can include the rappers and DJs are also artists, but certainly the people, subway graffiti writers in the film were the epitome of what I thought was the kind of artwork that people in New York were really proud of, and that was sort of pointing us in the direction that we all wanted to go in, which was to find a way that culture could represent the most broad spectrum of people.
And what does it mean to have the film here in 2025, London Film Festival? Because I guess in a way, at the time it was capturing a moment But how does that moment look now, 40 years on?
Well, we happen to have a 4K of the movie that is just being released right now, a 4K of Wild Style in a restoration that has taken us 2 years to complete, and is a high quality that if you haven't seen it it's meant to be shown in a movie theater, because really I remember what the 35 millimeter print looked like. This is 5 times better than the theatrical print that it was shown in the movie theater. And it's also in a square format because the movie was shot originally in 16 millimeter. So we're getting away from that, how the 35 was getting wider and wider. Well, we're getting more and more square and condensing it. And I thought it looked fantastic when it was shown I've seen it screened twice. And in both times, the theater was completely sold out. People were really cool. They stayed because I had Lee Quinones, the star of the movie, with me on stage to give a talk. And then I did the Prince Charles Cinema last night at 9:30, and that was also sold out. And they also stayed for the talk. That's wild, isn't it?
Haven't you also got a party happening tonight?
I'm spoiled. What?
Haven't you also got a party happening tonight?
Well, I also am doing a
exhibition
painting show at the Woodbury House Gallery, which is still open today for the rest of today at the gallery, and so I'm sort of tickled pink over so many of these things happening at once. Like, what can I say? I love London. This is like several dreams in a row coming true all at once.
And how do you think you reflect as well? Do you think times have changed in terms of how we see art, who can be an artist? Is that something that's very different now than back in 1980?
Well, it was a question mark in 1980. I don't think now is a question mark. I think and I dare say that the movie introduced the whole culture that was being born at that time in New York City, and that culture in the next 2 years traveled around the world and transformed what people think of as who artists are, where it comes from. Those are questions that I thought were key to the whole question of what culture is. I think that question was answered like in the 80s. Can we say that? I think that's true. And not that it's over with, but it continues to be something worth asking. But I would say in general, people are not wondering about it the way they did then. That is kind of what the definition of hip hop is, isn't it?
And what's going to be next for you? Are you working on any other projects?
I am. I've got some painting projects that I'm working on, and I've got several video projects that I'm working on. I'm not dependent on things. I'm very self-propelling in terms of creativity.
Maybe you can look back at that moment 40 years ago and say, oh, we've progressed in lots of positive ways, but are there other aspects that maybe you feel nostalgic for? You know, in the fact that things can feel so divisive now?
Like crying nostalgia, like crying when I was watching my movie, nostalgic. I mean, my feeling of watching the movie, first of all, the two leads, Lady Pink was like 16 years old when I cast her in this part, with like this cherub-like baby face and thick, black, glossy, thick hair that was so amazing. I was sitting next to Lee Quinones, who they were lovers at the time when they were making the movie. They were children, they were kids. And he's watching the movie with me, and he's saying, I feel like I'm falling in love with her right now. It's like, and I felt like the innocence of all that is so real. And innocence is not the same as naivete, is it? It's something real innocence has to do with purpose and has to do with the way things exist for a reason. Innocence is is not about getting somewhere. It's what you are and how you're true to feelings that you're having.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm really excited for you having this amazing moment in London, and enjoy your party later.
Thank
I
you.
want to come.
Thank you.